Hello, everyone.
I'm Carl.
And I'm Em.
Welcome to our podcast discussing all the latest books. This is our 8th episode, and we will be discussing It Starts With Us by Collen Hoover. We will be saving our ratings until the very end.
We promise to give you all of our honest opinions on all the characters, chapters, and scenarios. We don't mean any harm to any of the authors. This is solely our opinion. We promise, as always, to Carl them like we read them.
Period. All right, so I don't believe this book has any trigger warnings at the beginning. You probably listened to our last episode, which is It Ends With Us. That one probably requires more trigger warnings because there are actual scenes in there. This has one scene where he corners her that might be a little triggering for some. Other than that, it's more of reflecting on those sorts of emotions and how she moves on and heals from that. So it's not as triggering, I would imagine, in this book.
Just more so emotional trauma of remembering that.
Yeah, but as always, still take care of yourself. Self-care, self-love. You deserve it. And spoilers will be ahead.
If you don't want to hear how this book ends, please pause here, go to read the first book, read the second book, and then come back to this episode because we will be discussing a lot of details that you may not want to know if you have not read it. So, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's get into it.
So we start off with chapter 1. We kind of pick up where book 1 ended at. So Lilly and Atlas run into each other on the street, and Lilly has been working on herself for, I think it was like a year-ish kind of timeline, 8 months to a year.
Yeah, I think Emmy was 11 months old, I think.
So she had decided to divorce Ryle and decided to work on herself for a little bit, which granted, I mean, it was not a healthy relationship and she probably had to recover from a lot of that. So it was well deserved. But as she's running by Atlas, they rekindle and she basically says, hey, I'm ready for me to start something.
I love Atlas. So just every time you say his name, I'm just going to get giddy. Don't mind me.
So then they decide to meet up at some point. But they both were in a rush. She had opened her store and Atlas had somebody who was defacing his restaurant. So he had to get there. So it was a quick interaction, but it set the tone for everything going forward. So as they get separated and Atlas goes to his restaurant, I do find it pretty funny that he goes upon his restaurant and somebody had spray painted asshole on the side of the building, but had spelled the hole wrong.
Yeah, it was 2 words.
And then hole was spelled with a W. And so it was pretty funny, which we ended up finding out it was a younger kid. So, I mean, didn't know how to spell it properly, I guess, or he just really found it funny, I think was what his excuse was. But
I think it's the way his mom pronounced it, I think.
Yeah.
When she called him that, there was always a space in there and it sounded wrong.
Yeah. And I found it funny too that he just literally snuck in and stole the crouton. I mean, the register, he didn't steal any of the equipment. What the crap? I found that scene funny to start off with, which I'm going to be honest, this book, a lot of it, I felt like was just trying to give clarity to the ending of Atlas and Lilly's story. So I didn't feel it was as good as the first one, just because I felt like there was so much intense, really deep thoughts that were going into a lot of it, where this one doesn't really have as much as that. But I love the love story. So I just want to say that. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about is just kind of stuff that set up their love story. So I don't want anybody to get feeling like we're talking about nonsense here or anything.
Yeah,
but
no, I definitely agree with you. We've talked about it. I think there was a big opportunity to explore more of like the healing journey after domestic violence in this book. And I just don't think she hit her mark. I feel like there's so much hype around the love story that she just wrote this book to give people that love story, which is great. I loved it. I love Atlas. I love the way Atlas loves Lilly and the way Atlas loves Emmy. And it's just really good. But I also wish we could have seen a little bit more of that next step in your journey for domestic violence, because it doesn't end when you leave. It lingers. And she kind of hints at that a little bit, but not truly. And I don't know if that's because Lilly and Ryle were in a shorter relationship. You know, normally domestic violence is quite some time. So I don't know if that had an impact on it or not, but I would have liked a little bit more of that healing journey and what happens when you leave, just because it is educational and also because like we said in the last episode, that is normally the highest point, the most dangerous point, and I feel we kind of missed that, not including it.
Well, and there had been instances in that time period where something scary had happened. There was some, like the first one, I feel like she tried to give such a good message about domestic violence and really educate people while writing a good story. And this one, I feel like it kind of missed the mark of continuing to educate because it doesn't just, like you said, stop. So I think that there was a missed mark there, but it is still a really good story. So people continue listening because the love story is just, I mean, man, I think he's just like 1 in a million kind of person.
If there was ever a character, a person that I was like, here's a model example of how you deserve to be loved, Atlas Corrigan would be the example.
Yes.
Every day.
100%.
And I've read a lot of books, and I know a lot of people, and Atlas Corrigan would be that example every day.
Yes. So we get to chapter 2, and we end up finding out that Lily, as part of her healing journey, gets away while Ryle has Emmy, and she sits in her car journaling. And again, her safe person is Ellen DeGeneres. So she's writing to Ellen in her car and just processing her emotions and her feelings. And she's walking through the emotions of seeing Atlas again and what she should do, what she shouldn't do. She doesn't want to cause problems with Ryle. And I think that's often with, again, a domestic violence situation where people have a hard time moving on because of that fear. And granted, we do see where it did cause some problems, but I don't think in any way it was as bad as what it could have been. But I do think that, of course, it did cause some problems. And at the end, we do find out that Ryle sort of is okay with it, sort of. But I mean, he at least is a little bit more mature than what he has been the rest of the series. But in this situation, completely understandable where she's trying to process that. She's trying to get through those emotions and understand how she can move on from him. And she puts off messaging Atlas for quite some time to try to avoid while she's processing, which is really sucky because we could have had the whole entire romance a lot sooner. But you know, it is what it is. But
well, that's my first thought when I read it was like, oh, that makes me so sad that he has missed like a whole year of Emmy's life, especially because the first year is so important. And I feel bad for Emmy missing out on that sort of bond with a father figure. But also, I can understand the needing her own journey before she was ready. So I was sad that Emmy, and I loved it. And this is jumping to the end, but oh well. I love when we finally get that sort of, they have some sort of bond and she's reaching for him and stuff. I love that because that's part of the story too. It's not just Lily and Atlas's love story, but the whole point was that she's giving her daughter a better chance, a better father figure, you know, better people in her life. So I just thought that was really cute.
Well, and I really enjoyed Atlas's therapist is Brad's 12-year-old son. That kid is so smart. I want him as my therapist. 110%. I loved their exchanges every time they talked. It was so mature, but yet so innocent at the same time. And I loved it. He shot it to it straight, but yet still had a, funny undertone to it.
It was a really good way to have like a comedic relief in this story. Since it was supposed to be such a heavy topic and the past book was such a heavy topic, to have some sort of comedic relief, it was really good. That was a great idea. That might be one of like the best parts of the book. The love story is awesome, but writing wise, that was really good to break up everything.
I really appreciate that Atlas was also going on a journey of healing, I guess you can almost say.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he also had a lot to process in his life, but I really enjoyed that he was willing to speak to somebody and kind of work on his own healing, even if it was a 12-year-old kid. But, I do think he was a little bit more mature and was able to give him some perspective that he had not thought about before. So I think that was really healthy for Atlas as well.
I love that he always somehow brought in a little like fish pun or two. I love that he's always making fun of him. And I love when he finally shows him a picture of Lily and he's like, she is so far out of your league. And Alice is like, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's so cute.
We get into Atlas texts Lily and she just responds, you two, and doesn't really continue the conversation very much. So again, we're at a standstill with their relationship evolving or anything like that. But Lily tries to process where she needs to set boundaries with Ryle. So she basically has been letting this man come and go from her apartment. He has a key to her place, which honestly, that confused me based on the past experience she has with him.
I agree.
I don't feel like 11 months or a year or whatever time period is enough time to trust a man that did you like that to let him have a key to your apartment, even if you have a child together.
I was going to say, I think it'd be different if she still lived in the apartment that they had lived in together and he just happened to have a key, but she completely switched and moved somewhere else. So why she ever had a spare key made for him doesn't make sense to me in this situation.
Well, and it would be different if he had not been abusive. I could probably get on board with that. But considering how much he had done to her and she still is kind of nervous about how he could react to things, that didn't really make sense to me why that would be the case.
I just want to preface this as we get into it. I'm not going to go on and on about the references to child custody and legal stuff in here, but it got on my nerves a little bit. I don't feel like it was double checked.
Well, and speaking of, it kind of broke my heart a little bit, and it really made me realize even more so how dangerous a situation can be, because you never know if no longer the parent's there to be abused, if the kids are going to get abused. And she makes the comments whenever Raul asks that she does not want Emmy to have overnights until she can speak and she can express that if something is going on. And that really kind of broke my heart, but complete understanding. I mean,
oh yeah,
there's no question in my mind. I would probably do the same thing if I was in her situation, because you never know what instance could turn somebody to be violent towards a child. And especially considering children do things without thinking. So if adult is doing something while thinking and still abused, I can only see how it could be reflected in that aspect.
We talked about this in the last episode, but I wish his blackouts would have been more explained, because it's almost like a second personality that takes over. That's how it was described. So if that's the case, then he wouldn't be able to control whether or not he abused the kid also. Yeah. It would happen. It's inevitable. So I wish that went into a little bit more detail so that we could have made that more clear, but 100%. With the way they described it, he would have done something, whether intentional or not, intentional for the child, he probably would have hurt the kid.
Yeah, 100%.
Even if it was like a grabbing the arm or something and leaving a mark. But I'm not saying he would have punched the kid in the face. I don't know. But he would have done something where he crossed a line. It was inevitable.
So then we get a situation back with Atlas. And this is dual perspective, so each chapter is different. So we're going to be swapping back and forth between the two.
I'm so glad we did that and it wasn't just Lily.
Yes. So we get the scene where his other restaurant is vandalized. Atlas's other restaurant is vandalized again. And he ended up going back and looking at the security cameras because they're working at this location and not the other one. And he finds a teenager sleeping on the doorstep. We also, in that same chapter, get where his mom reaches out to him. And we start learning a little bit, because in the first book we didn't ever get Atlas's side. So we never really got the background with his mom. And so we started learning a lot more about how she treated him. And honestly, it was horrid. I mean, I don't know how in the world this woman was able to have another child, to be honest, because I mean, just the way she treated him was just ghastly. I mean, she literally chose her significant other, if you want to call him that, over Atlas and kicked him out. And
I don't understand how, in the real world, I think there would have been CPS calls. I think
100%.
100% there would have been some sort of involvement. I'm not saying they would have taken Atlas, obviously, because we don't know what would be reported, things like that. Yeah. But something would have happened. And there's a scene where in the first book, he supposedly tells Lily that he was too old for child services to help him. So what that means, though, is they would have been put on alert that his mother kicked him out of the house.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. I don't know. It's not realistic to me, but it's all right.
Yeah, there was a lot more that could have helped him. And then we end up, finding out that the teenager vandalizing his store is his brother. And so it just...
That was really sad for me. My heart broke, him finding out there's been a younger version of him this whole time, and who feels abandoned by him, even though he didn't know, obviously, but the little brother doesn't know that. And for mom to make him out to be a villain, I wanted to beat her up. Well,
and not only that, but I think Atlas discovering that his brother was in the same situation, basically, that he was.
And honestly, probably worse, because once the guy left her, she probably was worse than she was originally.
Yeah. And it's just horrible to me. I just don't understand how, even if you don't want children, I mean, they didn't ask to be here any more than the next person. So if they're there, give them a chance at a better life. I would think that if you did it wrong with the first child, you try to do it right with the second one. But I guess that's just not the thing. And I would almost say that it sounds like maybe the mom's on drugs or something because she can't keep a job and she can't, afford bills and things like that. And Alice had to take care of a lot of that. So I think there's some drug relation going on, but it doesn't actually ever pinpoint that.
It is interesting, though, to see another prong of domestic violence through Atlas's story. And we do really get more of that in this book than we did in the first book. So that is interesting through Atlas's and his younger brother's story, too. But
yeah,
because Lily didn't exactly have that experience. There was one incident that Dad did attack Lily, but other than that, nothing else happened from Dad to her. It was just Mom. So it's interesting to see another side of domestic violence and that sort of cycle.
Yeah, we end up kind of getting into the first steps of Atlas and Lily's relationship. So Atlas stops by the shop to bring Lily lunch.
So stinking cute.
It was.
Listen, the way to my heart is through my stomach. I love that. I was like, you brought her lunch?
Take note, man. She's single.
Lunch, oh, gosh. And lunch that he made himself, too. That makes it even hotter. This man literally cooked her a meal and delivered it to her doorstep.
Well, I can't say there's a single thing that Atlas did that I was not just like.
That's true. That's true.
He's the best. But in this scene, Ryle ends up showing up to the shop. And of course, even though that Lily has set boundaries, she's asked for a key back, she's asked for him to stop stopping by randomly, things like that. He shows up and of course gets a little fishy. But Alyssa's trying to cover for her. And also, again, I think I mentioned it last episode, love Alyssa. Honestly, she is so good at separating her emotions from her being a sister to being a friend. So I love that.
I don't know that even me personally that I would be able to do that. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult.
I'm not saying I would support my brother, but I think it would be difficult for me to play both sides of it. I probably would have to remove myself entirely. I would rather not talk about it, maybe. Like,
yeah,
it's there. I know it's happening. He's wrong. But can you vent to somebody else about it?
So Alice gets pulled into a closet to hide him from Ryle. And they kind of, I get why she did it.
Yeah, no, I understand it. But I didn't like it.
I didn't like it either. But I did completely understand because I do think it would have ended up in a huge tussle in the middle of her flower shop.
Okay, and let Ryle get what he deserves.
Well, he should, but...
If he wants to tussle, Atlas can hold his own.
I don't think it would have ended up at the end of this book where it started at. I think it would have made it way worse, and it never, I don't think, would have gotten there because it would have already started off on a negative foot, which it already is sort of negative, but it's like half a foot, not a full foot kind of thing.
I will say, I didn't like her putting him in the closet, but I did love the way Atlas responded.
Mm-hmm.
I just loved it. And he was like, you come in the closet too.
So we ended up finding out that Theo, which is Brad's son, likes someone, and it is a male in his class. And this was his first time coming out of the closet. And Atlas's response was so sweet. It was so accepting. It was so just inviting. And I think that was the best person that Theo probably could have come out to. It was just the sweetest interaction. It made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Because not only that, but their relationship has always kind of been one-sided. So for Theo to feel comfortable enough to come out to him, I feel like was a kind of amazing since, Atlas says he doesn't really speak about himself very much. So I think it was a good kind of door opened, and their conversation, I think, made maybe Theo feel a little bit better about going forward and having a positive interaction.
Yeah, well, again, back to that's just Atlas loving everybody around him and loving them so well, and I just love that about him. But also, I love that we get to see the way Atlas responds, and then we get the parallel when he finally tells Josh later on. He tells Josh later on, and I love that in the short period of time that he's had Josh, he's even taught Josh that's how you're supposed to react.
Yeah.
That just shows you how great of a guy that Atlas is, and I cannot get over it. But absolutely, I love that he is immediately accepting. But I love that when Josh reacts, because the scene is that Theo is going to a pride march, and Josh is like, I want to go. And Theo's like, no, why would you go? And Josh is like, why can't I go? Like, why are you trying to keep me from it? And Theo was just like so shook that he would even want to go. It was
Yeah.
I just loved it. It was really sweet.
It was very supporting. And like you said, I think anybody in a minute in Atlas's presence, all of a sudden, I mean, even his guy friends, even the way
Yeah.
they react to things is so amazing. And I don't know what else to say besides he's fantastic.
Well, you know why, right?
What do you mean?
It's because he's fictional.
Well, yes, but
He ain't real, baby girl. I got bad news for us.
you can always hope and wish. If anybody is like Atlas, Carly's number is.
Stop.
I'll put it in the comments.
Do not put my number out on the internet. I can't hide from anybody. It's unfortunate. I just wanted to read the list that Lily has that she refers back to when she has a moment with Ryle that she needs clarity, because I was like, oh, it hit me in the chest when you very first read that. And so I know the answers to these questions, but sometimes it feels good to read the reminders. Number 1, he slapped you because you laughed. Number 2, he pushed you down a flight of stairs. Number 3, he bit you. Number 4, he tried to force himself on you. Number 5, you had to get stitches because of him. Number 6, your husband physically hurt you more than once. It would have happened again and again. Number 7, you did this for your daughter. And I added number 8, and I wrote, and he could do it to her too. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, that list is, I think it's a great idea that she goes back and has those reminders so that she never forgets what happened. Yes. But also, I hate that she has to even have the reminders, if that makes sense.
I think it was very good for her healing, though, to have that as almost like a safety net to fall back to, especially when we get to her relationship with Atlas and seeing the way he is. 110%. I think that, you know, those reminders were good to get her where she goes. But I think
it
that
just breaks my heart.
Yes.
That's the only way I can describe it. It just breaks my heart that you even have to have a list. That there's even anything that happened that caused you to have a list.
It is.
It makes you want to beat Ryle up. I'm not going to lie to you. When I very first read this book, that's what I wanted. I wanted Atlas to beat Ryle up.
I think the only fault I have with Atlas, and I know this is not really his fault, but I feel like whenever he saw her on campus, if he would have stopped and said it, then this whole situation with Ryle wouldn't have happened. However, she then wouldn't have Emmy, but I feel...
Okay, but they might have their own version of Emmy. And just because she was with some college guy on campus, who cares?
Yeah. That's the only fault I have with Atlas.
I agree. I was disappointed.
But he couldn't have ever imagined...
But then he named his restaurant Bibbs. I mean, come on. I will say, though, and we might get to this scene later, but with the scene where he finds out that she has the tattoo, but he sees the bite scars next to it, I'm going to cry thinking about it. It literally broke my heart. I mean, that's probably the only scene in this entire book that I actually cried over. But I cried. I was like, for the rest of her life and his life, that will physically be a reminder that she can never get rid of. And I was just like, beat him up, beat Ryle up. That's what I wanted. I was like, beat him up.
Well, and then they start FaceTiming each other, and they start having like little
that he FaceTimed her.
And he asked her to read a page from her journal, so she starts reading from her journal about him. Yeah. And to me, that was very intimate. It was letting him inside of her head situation, especially whenever she gives him one of the journals. So intimate, but he invites her out on a date, and she allows him to borrow the journal before the date. And luckily she did, because she ends up falling asleep on the way there. And I found it so sweet that he was willing to like let her sleep instead of being like, hey, let's go on our date after we haven't been able to date for, 10 years. It was just so sweet. And he took video of her too while she's sleeping so he could tease her about it later. I mean, there's just nothing bad you can say about him
I
whatsoever.
know, we're just gonna keep coming back to, gosh, I love Atlas. This whole episode is just gonna be about Atlas.
And then, I mean, he's reading about their first kiss. He goes and writes a letter of how he perceived their first kiss and his perspective on it. It was just so sweet. I have a problem actually with Atlas is he didn't kiss her goodnight that night.
I know, but I love that he later on was like, I should have kissed you goodnight. And she was like, you should have kissed me goodnight. I love that sort of banter that we get from not having a goodnight kiss. Also.
He should have kissed her though. After waiting for that long, he should have. And I think, honestly, if they would have actually went into the restaurant and actually had dinner, it probably would have ended up in a kiss. But because they didn't actually spend time together and he just read her thoughts and then he responded to them, I think it probably wasn't as intimate, first datey as he hoped. Really, if you think about it, that was their first date ever, really, outside of her housing him secretly. So,
well, and I love too, like, the way, not only did he like read her journal, but he like devoured it. He was so into it, reading it and loving it. And I was like, golly.
And he kept looking over at her while he was reading it.
Yes. I could just picture it in my head too. The scene was just playing out and I was just like, again, heart eyes. I just love Atlas.
So then we get to the point where Lily goes to pick up Emmy after the date and Ryle is there. And Ryle has discovered while watching Finding Nemo that her middle name is actually because of Atlas and Lily's relationship in the past.
No, it's not because of Atlas and Lily.
It wasn't specifically, but there was a connection there from that situation. So
she loved Dory though before that. I understand it added the significance, but she did love Dory before that. And the way that Ryle handled it obviously was not right.
Well, but their first interaction in this book, she made it a point to tell Ryle that her middle name was Dory. Yeah, so to me, it just, she knew
just because she knew he would understand why it meant so much to her. She was a teenager watching Finding Nemo. If I invited an 18-year-old over to my house to watch TV, I'm not about to play Finding Nemo. So it had to mean something to her.
So anyways, we move on to where Ryle tries to seduce Lily and
tries to seduce her.
Where he shoves her up against the wall. She ends up crying in the hallway with Marshall right afterwards.
Okay, maybe. I didn't take it as seduction. I took it more as like pathetic begging.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about seduction of like, come back to your old life. We were so perfect. Gotcha, not like sexual seduction, just more so seducing her. I
was thinking sexual seduction. So, yeah, no. I got you then. All right, continue. I'm sorry.
Lily crying in the hallway, and Marshall was taking out the trash, and he ends up running into her. And he admits that Alyssa cheated, which that threw me for a loop. I didn't ever picture how lovey-dovey they were, which really, she just kissed another guy while she was super drunk.
I was going to say, once she explains it, it's less serious. But when he very first said she cheated on me, I was like, what do you mean? Yeah. What do you mean, Marshall? Like, I need more details.
It took me off guard. I was like, there is no way she cheated. There is no way. And then, I mean, we ended up finding out she just kissed another dude while she was drunk, but I do feel like it's a slight cheat, but I don't feel like it's like she cheated on me announcement.
Well, I think it's cheating, but I think you have to provide context for it to be understood that it's not like we weren't married and you went and slept with somebody else. You know?
Yes.
He made it seem much more, he made it seem like a real big affair rather than it was way back in the day and it was just a kiss. But to him, it might have felt that betrayal. I mean, you know what I mean? It might have felt that serious. So, but you could see from her point of view, she was like, I just kissed a dude. I was 19. Yeah. I think she said it doesn't count before you're 21 or something. And I was like, okay, I don't think that's true, but that's funny.
It's a good try.
Before we move on from that, can I read what Marshall says to her?
Yeah.
I think I lied. I think I did cry reading this scene too. So it's just a little end. Nothing you have done and nothing you could do would excuse any man's hands on you out of anger. Remember that, Lily. You made the right choice by leaving that situation. You should never feel guilty for that. Pride is the only thing you should feel. That broke my heart because, like, that's his best friend. That's been his best friend for forever. And even he can affirm her feelings that you have done what you should have done. There's nothing else you could, that there's nothing you could do that could ever equal a man putting his hands on you and justify that. And you were right to leave. And I feel like, other than his sister, his best friend and his sister, if both of them are telling you you're right, you're right. But also, to have that confirmation and that affirmation of that, I feel like that's rare. And it is bittersweet because it's so sad that you even have to have that moment, but also like warms my heart that they are supporting you and being honest and calling him out on his BS. I love that.
I agree completely. And Marshall, we don't get a lot of him, and I kind of wish we did get a little bit more of him, because I also think he could have been a little bit of comic relief in the first one a little bit more.
Yeah, I actually would agree.
But I mean, I like Marshall too. I think he treats Alyssa fantastic. I think that the way that he reacts to everything with Lily, standing guard in the same room as Ryle and Lily, I really feel like he means well as well. And I kind of wish as well that Colleen would maybe write a little bit of a story about Alyssa and Marshall to get a little bit of their backgrounds, because I feel like it would be very similar to Lily and Atlas's like struggles with their relationships and things like that, just based on the snippets we got.
So I love the like childhood crush turns into lover. So that would be really cute to have that. I've never thought about that before. I've never once in my mind thought, I wish you would have wrote their story. And now that you say that, I'm like, absolutely. Why would you not?
Yes. I mean, I feel it's just like a side story that I was intrigued to know more while I was reading it. I mean, and the more we kind of got here and there, I was just like, oh, I really would like to know a little bit more about how they got to where they're at. Because I mean, they're so in love still after being childhood sweethearts. Like they're still so in love with each other. And also his rise to being a millionaire. I would love to be able to see all their struggles when they first got together, her cheating on him, like all of that. I would love to see where they got to the point that they were.
Well, and the infertility topic would be another deep, hot topic that she could have another book about. That's a great idea. You should write Colleen and tell her. Colleen, write the book, babe. Please.
Shout out.
We'll be our readers.
Yes, please. I'll gladly read any of your books anytime. So we have a little bit of snippet, which I'm just going to go over, where Atlas's mom shows up at his restaurant and basically relays the news that he has a brother. Surprise. And she is just like, you need to get him home for me so I don't go to jail. So
she was, and literally was like, you know about him. Babe, how would he know about him? You left because I was pregnant. Where in your mind did you come to that conclusion?
I mean, yeah, he could read your mind and know that you're pregnant. Like
he has X-ray vision. What?
Yeah.
She's crazy. I think you're right that she had to have some sort of probably drug use or something, because otherwise she's just sitting at home all day and ain't nobody concerned about that. That's crazy.
Well, and just the way that she just never had any money or wanted to have stability. It just, to me, it screamed either she wanted to mooch off the government or she was on drugs, one or the other.
Yeah.
So we get the scene right after all this happens where Atlas drives to Lily's place just to hug her. Just literally shows up to hug this woman because he feels like she's just having a bad day. Let's just appear at this woman's door, like drive across town just to hug her. I mean, can he do no wrong? I really don't feel like he can.
Oh, babe, he's a man. That's the only reason.
But
so she also, sweet, though. I loved it, and I loved that she was like
thoughtful.
Yeah, and she was like, you drove 5 miles to give me a hug. And he was like, I'd run 5 miles to give you a hug. And I love that she, before he got there, she was like, does hug mean something else nowadays? She was panicking. Is there something, am I misunderstanding his cues? And then he literally drove over there to give her a hug.
Well, and she gives him another journal as well. So, I mean, that gave him even more of an insight. And while he's reading this other journal, he stakes out his restaurant waiting for his brother to show up. And he reads about their first time having sex. From reading his perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you think differently, but I just don't think he realized how much every interaction they had meant to her and how the glued to memory she had with every little touch she had, every little bat of the eyelashes, like anything she seemed to catch up on, and it meant so much to her. And I don't think he was as in love with her as he was towards the end until he read everything detail about how much she loved him.
I haven't thought about that, whether or not, like, if he fell more in love with her after reading how she fell in love with him. But I do absolutely agree that I don't think he realized back in the day how much of an impact he had on her in the same way that she had an impact on him as well. I don't think he realized that.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, though, what she was going through, she had friends, but none of her friends knew about it. She didn't know that any of her friends were actually experiencing it at home either. So Atlas was the very first person that she could be honest about what's happening at home. And so even if they hadn't fallen in love, there would have been a sort of a confidant relationship.
Yes.
And like I said, where they're not turned into love, there would have been a deep bond over the fact that they both are abused and neglected. And so it was inevitable. But also, I did love watching him find out how she fell in love with him. And I love him being like, I can't even compete with 18-year-old me.
Yeah.
What the heck? Or whatever. It was cute.
So we get where he invites Josh back to his house, which if somebody's causing you thousands of dollars worth of damage, it's a big risk to take them back to your house where they can do even more. But I mean, I get where he's coming from. So don't get me wrong. And it's Atlas. So he's going to do what he's going to do.
Yes. Atlas is so great. I'm going to just say that. Every time they said that, I'm just saying, yeah, Atlas is so great.
I mean, I can't even
comprehend. He can do no wrong.
I can't even comprehend a better description. Like, he's just amazing. All the adjectives, he is him. Anyways, so the mom and Rob come over, which I love that too, that we finally get her happy ever after just a little bit, even though we didn't go into much detail. I really do love that. And
yeah, when she's like, he's a good man, Lily.
And like even Robin and Lily's interactions was so sweet, and it was I think it gave her a little bit of hope in meeting him that she could, move on and get a better relationship with, Atlas or whoever she moved on with, which we know is Atlas. But in the moment she thought for whoever. So
she was secretly thinking Atlas, but she was trying not to get her hopes up.
Yes. So we get to the scene where she FaceTimes Atlas and he talks about trying to get custody of Josh. And the next scene where Atlas goes and drops him off at the hotel and his mom ends up hitting Josh. I just wanted to get through that book and I just wanted to punch her myself. I mean, I probably would have not handled it the way Atlas did, but of course he's a god and he does everything right. But he just...
Accurate. No, I agree. I would not have handled it the way he did.
And I really think he was smart taking him to the emergency room and documenting the abuse for himself. And I hate that Josh still was not on board until he got that closure of his dad was not great. But again, I really appreciate that Atlas didn't ruin his image for him. He was around, maybe not in a good way, but he was around, He never once had something bad to say about the man because he didn't want to taint Josh's imagery of him. And he's just fantastic.
He is. It makes me want to cry. He's so awesome. And I will say, I do love that once they got there and Josh kind of had that realization, like, he says he has a truck and I always pictured him too poor to have a vehicle to be able to drive back and find me. That broke my heart. And even Atlas then was still just trying to be supportive and, whatever you want to do, bud. And then when he said, he's not a good guy, is he? And Atlas was like, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That broke my heart. Ugh. And then, though, I will say, the only way that scene could have been made better is the exact way that it ended. And that was like, can I flip him off? And then Atlas is honking at him and he's giving him the bird as they drive off. And I was like, that's the only way you can make that better.
Well, and the next scene after trying to get custody of Josh is Josh and Theo meet and become instant besties. And Theo admits to Atlas that Josh is the bully that bullies bullies. And it's crazy to me because oftentimes a kid that ends up in that situation is not great. And sometimes they become the bully because of their situation to try to get out of it and be the bigger, macho person because they're the ones being abused. But for both Josh and Atlas to end up in the situation where they both are great people is just crazy to me. And I think that's really a testament to just both of them, who they are and overcoming their situations, because they both turned out to be really great people, which of course Josh ends up being influenced a little bit more by Atlas to do completely the correct thing. But it's still, I think it's a really good testament to both of them being strong enough to overcome their situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it speaks not only to their resilience, but their character, that they saw the worst and then still, instead of, instead of mimicking that and being angry and upset about it, they learned from it and did better. That's always
Well,
the goal, but
yeah, and then we get a situation where Lily and Atlas get into a little bit of a spat, and I absolutely love that scene because she knew, even though Atlas was getting angry and everything, that she was safe with him and that she was not gonna be harmed in any way. And which is crazy because coming from the situation she came from, I could see where any angry man would make her worried. But she knew who Atlas was, and that she knew he was, even though he was angry, he was not going to be some crazy man that's going to bash her head in or anything like that. Like, I mean,
or
it
shove
was,
her down a flight of stairs.
yes. And
I'm
so,
still not over it. I'm not ever going to be over it.
well, and I just loved that. I loved that she was able to feel so safe with him, even after all the time of them not being around each other and together. She still felt safe with him, and I just love that. Which we get the kiss, and so it just, I really, Atlas is fantastic,
Oh, I know. He's just so good.
and I loved the piggyback ride that he gave her. Like, it just so sweet.
He is.
I put like 10 hearts next to it because it was just such a sweet scene. They end up and have some intimate moments, and she ends up leaking some breast milk, so it makes it a little bit awkward on her side. But I loved, again, how Atlas handled the whole situation, was
Yes.
completely chill with it. Like, it happens, don't worry.
It's natural, baby.
Yeah.
He was like, I'm almost flattered. No.
So I found it very interesting about the hospital scene where the hospital staff knew what Lily's dad had been doing, and the police officer had threatened Atlas. And that to me is another thing of, what is that called whenever there's a bajillion people around, but yet nobody speaks up because they think the next person will?
The bystander effect?
Yes. I really feel like that this whole town was that. Everybody knew that Lily's dad was abusing her mom and potentially even her, because she had to go to the hospital a couple times and nobody said anything. Nobody, I mean, at least in the hospital, you feel like they would report the abuse. I mean, they're bound to report abuse, and especially
They
on their
are for
child.
children. They're mandated
Yeah.
reporters. So when that happened to her, if they had any sort of inkling that it was abuse, they should have reported it. And based on her injuries, there's no way her story would not have lined up. They should have
No.
reported it. But again, what world we're set in here, you know what I mean? What year, what era we're set in here is not probably what really would have been. But
It's horrible.
it
And
is. And it's almost like, if I were to find that out and I was Lily, or Lily's mom, even so, I would almost be like offended,
yeah.
or embarrassed, maybe, that I thought I was hiding it so well, and yet everybody knew and nobody else said anything either. And that makes me wonder, though, because we don't really have that backstory. So they may have said something. They may have tried to suggest, like, do you want to report him? Like, you should report it, and encourage her. And she
Yeah.
might have said no. So we don't really know for sure. But the police officer going in there and threatening Atlas is absolutely ridiculous. But he's the mayor. I don't know what else we would expect to happen.
Yeah.
He pays his paycheck. So, you know what I'm saying?
Well, whenever Ral does show up and shoves her against the wall and threatens her, he knocks on the door and he sees all their clothes. I appreciated the way that her mom and her end up having an interaction afterwards, because she gets scared that Ral's going to go and try to take Emmy from her mom. So they meet at a park. And I really appreciate that moment that they were able to have together, because it made me realize how much they had worked on their relationship and worked on building some trust in the last couple months that we hadn't seen her. So I really think that it was very, very sweet moment between the mom and Lily.
Well, I'm not going to lie. It was satisfying to me that Ryle found out by the fact that her panties were on the floor and there were 2 empty wine glasses.
Yes.
I was like, that's what you get, jerk.
Yep.
Rub it in your face. But yes, I do
So
agree. I love that mom was, because, and mom can understand because mom experienced it, but sometimes when people haven't experienced it, they don't understand. So I love that mom was like, where do you want me? I'll be there. You tell me I'm there. Nothing's going to happen. We'll make sure of it. And was right on board and supportive and did what Lily needed to be able to function and, process the moment. And even Atlas, even after she met her mom, then she goes to Atlas's house after that for safety. And the way he reacted was just so perfect and just so loving. And I just love Atlas.
Well, I really even appreciated the way that he reacted to Josh's family assignment and how he responded to that, because it talked about that a little bit in that scene too.
Little branches.
Yes, he was so supportive and just I mean, I just don't know what else to say about Atlas, but he's just freaking amazing.
This whole episode is just saying, "Oh, we love Atlas. He's so good.
We're gonna have to edit out so many of those, but I just don't know how else to describe. Every response he has is just the dream response to every situation, and
literally, I'm telling you, if you want to find out how you deserve to be loved, read this book and find you an Atlas.
100%. And I really love that the moments he has with Emmy too, Atlas's moments with Emmy, just the way he talks, he loves that child instantly. It's just like, it's a piece of the person I've loved the most of my life. I'm going to love this child equally. He does
the same with Josh too. He doesn't even know him, but it's his brother.
Yes.
And so he just automatically is like, well, that's my bestie.
Well, and we get the scene where Lily gets all the texts from Ryle and just he's blowing up on her. I could completely at that point understand where she's a little bit scared because he is threatening her and, sending her, which was a mistake on his end because she could definitely use all that in court because she's got the messages. So
that was so stupid to have it in writing.
Yes.
That's the first thing into my mind. You're an idiot for putting it in writing, which is awful, but you're an idiot for doing it, but you're an idiot for putting it in writing.
Yes. But then he shows up to the flower shop and he just blames Atlas for the entire situation. And I'm just like, dude, it was you. It was not Atlas.
Atlas didn't shove her down the stairs.
No, but he was trying to say that Atlas was the reason for him shoving her down the stairs. And it's no, like.
Yeah, you're so far off base. And I think that right there, when he started, when that was his reaction, I think it only solidified for her that she did the right thing. The fact that he cannot even take responsibility for something as crazy as shoving her down the stairs.
Yep.
And he wants to blame Atlas, and Atlas is just like this perfect little ball of love. I think that's when she was like, okay.
Well, and Atlas didn't tell you, hey, rape your wife.
Atlas didn't tell you to sink your teeth into her shoulder because she got a tattoo.
Before she knew you.
And that you wouldn't even know what it meant if you hadn't been snooping. Exactly. Atlas didn't tell you to crack your forehead into her head and give her a concussion where she had to get 6 stitches. Like, what?
I that's the biggest pet peeve of mine is somebody that doesn't take responsibility for what they're. I mean, if you are going to have the balls enough to do it, at least have the balls enough to admit that you've done it. Simple as that.
Period. You tell them.
I mean, I just don't get people that just think that they just can get away with it and just not admit that they've done it. Like, why?
Yeah, take accountability for what you do. Anyways, I agree.
So we then get to the point where Ryle comes at Atlas. He shows up at his restaurant. The way
and the way he handled
it was so amazing. He even says,
I wanted him to whoop him. I wanted him to beat
100%. I was waiting for it. I was like,
you don't pull up to my business acting a fool because I'm going to teach you a lesson.
But he was so calm. He was like, I got to let you go, Lily. Thanks for the warning. Let's go outside. Like,
he even let him take a swing at him.
Yeah.
He hit him once. He said, once is enough. You hit me a second time, though, we're going to have a problem. But still, I was like, ain't no way. You wouldn't hit me the first time.
And again, Atlas, I really appreciated that he was, I feel like, the only person that actually got through to Raul and was like, hey, idiot, you're an idiot. Like,
I agree.
and
I
Rob
think
was
if
like,
it
oh,
kind of
I got
shook
that.
Ryle, that was how he responded. I think that sort of, I don't want to say a reality check because he wasn't quite still full of reality after that, but enough of it that he was like,
I gotta go.
yeah, he was like, what?
Well, and I really did appreciate the comment that Atlas said that you're just fighting for the sake of fighting. You're not fighting for her. You're not fighting for your guys' relationship or anything like that. You're just fighting to fight. So what's the point?
Which,
uh,
again, coming back to the fact, there had to have been previous incidents where he was violent.
yes.
There's no way that there's not. With the way that he comes at Atlas, he's not blacking out when he's coming at Atlas. He's fully cognizant and throwing a punch at this man. So there's no way he was never, not once in the past, violent. So I do wish that would have been touched on a little bit too, but because ain't nobody that bold to just walk up to somebody's work and be like, I'm going to whoop you in broad daylight without having been violent before. Nobody does that. So,
well, and I really like the comment that they said of Rouse says you're the only person to get punched and then offer advice, like,
yeah,
which is kind of funny because I mean that's just who Atlas is. Like,
fair.
he's just such a good guy. I don't know how else to describe him.
I will say, I was a little disappointed with the scene because I think Ryle needed his tail end handed to him to put him in his place, at least so that he stops coming violently at Atlas and at Lilly. I think he needed to be checked.
Well, I think in reality, if you punch somebody who's so irrational, it's just going to incite more violence. I feel like it would continue the cycle. The more he realized he was affecting people, the more it almost fed into him wanting to bother people.
When you give them a reaction, they're going to keep going. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I disagree. I think in real life that if you let him continue to come to his restaurant and to punch him in the face, and he was going to do it he barged into the kitchen. He was going to hit him in the middle of the kitchen. But
I think it was a smart move for Atlas to move him outside though, because I feel like it definitely, he didn't have an audience to his behavior. So it was able to take away that show that he liked to put on a little bit.
But I would want witnesses.
Yes, but I think that it would have just made things a little bit more intense and a little bit more showy for him rather than actually handling it a little hair bit of maturely. So we get to the birthday party for Emmy, and I again love Alyssa. I just the way she was just like, hey, I'll watch your daughter tonight so that way you two can have some alone time. I love that she stopped by the kitchen. She just watched him work. She just got to enjoy a few minutes. And I feel like this was really the first time that she was able to and I may be reading this wrong, but up to this point, it doesn't seem like she really had much time for herself, because even whenever Emmy wasn't around, she really wasn't able to focus on herself because she had other responsibilities still to deal with. So I feel like this was the first time that she was actually able to like sit in a moment and actually enjoy that moment, other than her sneaking away and going to journal in her car.
I agree.
The shower scene was fantastic. I mean, just loved it. The shower scene was really, really good. It was delicious. And I love that they both know that the other is in game. From the whole conversations they had, the whole interaction, instantly I just knew that they both understood that they were going to be together for the rest of their lives. And it just took 1 minute to solidify that. And really, I mean, the first time they probably had sex probably wasn't any mature level. So to have all of these, instances where they just were able to be with themselves and be able to enjoy each other's company was just, I think it was just a testament to how familiar they were able to build their friendship to get to a point where they were so comfortable with each other after the fact.
I love too that he's like, okay, so are we done pretending that we're not in game? And like, how long do I have to wait until I ask you to move in? And how long do I have to wait until I can propose? And things like that. I love that, again, because her boundaries have been crossed so many times, he's letting her set these boundaries. He's letting her set the pace. We love that.
Yes.
It's so good.
And I mean, I also really love that he had a Lily emergency kit, because when she had ran
Yes.
away the first time to him, that he had been like, "Oh, I'm going to be prepared just in case she needs it again." And he sets up he got her some clothes, he got her a toothbrush, like all of this stuff. I was just like,
It's actually really sad though if you think about it, because that means like he spent the last year or so, or last
where did she call him
year,
up again?
that, and also every day he sees that extra toothbrush and thinks about her. A constant
Yeah.
reminder. It's really sad.
It is sad, but it's probably the sweetest thing ever. I
It
mean,
is.
to know that even though she didn't know, and honestly, if she did run back to him, which thank God she didn't have to, but if she did, I really think that would have I think that would have solidified her leaving if she hadn't already left. But I think if she had stayed and had that moment happen again and she had to run back to him, I really think that it would have been 10 times just a convincing thing. If this man can even think about getting me a toothbrush, but the other man can't think about whether or not it's right to send me down the staircase, I need to go.
Not the send me down the staircase.
I mean, that's what he did. But
Send me down the staircase.
what he did,
Hilarious. I know, that's just funny the way you put it.
I mean, he didn't lead her down the staircase, that's for sure.
No, he shoved her.
Yeah. So we get the scene at the end the next morning where Atlas's mom shows up at his front door and threatens him that she's going to try to take Josh away from him, and, you know, she's going to file that he kidnapped him. And honestly, the way Atlas responded to it was fantastic. I mean, I would have probably been like, "Hey, how much money can I give you just to leave us alone?" Because I think that's all she wanted the entire time. I don't think she wanted Josh. I think she wanted whatever Atlas could give her financially, so that way she could just continue to mooch and not have to worry about anything.
See, I don't actually think she wanted money. I think she liked the idea of, I think she liked like the power over another person. Like she was in charge,
Yeah.
because for so long she's not been in charge. Men lead her life or whatever. And so I think she got off. I think that's why she used to hit Atlas too, the control and the power that it gave her, which is obviously bad, but I think that's probably why. Because he offered to give her money and she said no at first. And
Yeah.
then when he found out she wasn't at the hotel, he said, "Well, take this, go back to the hotel because you need to be there in case he comes back." But she didn't ask for money originally, and when he first offered, she rejected it.
Yeah, but I think he would have been able to offer her pretty decent sum just to drop and sign over custody.
Maybe. It's a little more complicated than that, but maybe.
Well, and then we just to go over it because we already have talked about it. Atlas takes Josh to meet his dad. And I do really enjoy that Atlas gave Josh a chance. And he knew there was a slight possibility he may not come back home with Josh, but he allowed Josh to make his own decision in that. And I really appreciate that, because a lot of times if you see somebody and you know what situation it could be, you don't want to let them lead to that. And I was really worried for a minute that Josh would go ahead and go and be with his dad, but I really appreciate that he took the time to process it of, this man did not lead up to what I had imagined all this time, and he in a way let him down without even actually getting to know the man. So it was sad, but at the same time I really appreciated that Atlas allowed Josh that space to be able to come to that conclusion himself, because I don't think it would have been good if Atlas would have forced Josh to come back home with him without actually having that chance to process and get to his own point of that.
No, I completely agree. I don't think that I think it would have been a completely different outcome had he tried to force it. And I love, like you said, that he let him make his own decision. But also, we talked about earlier, I love that he didn't want to shatter that image that he had of his dad for him, because Atlas knows how disappointing it is, and he didn't want to do that to Josh.
Yes.
But on top of all of that, the fact that he was willing to let him go and potentially live with his dad and make that choice, knowing that it would break Atlas's heart, and still he drove him to his dad's house.
Yes.
Again, I just love Atlas Corrigan. I could never. I'd be like, okay, listen, I'm sorry. I love you and I want to protect your innocence, but your dad is not good and he's going to hurt you just like he hurt me. And I cannot do that. If you really want me to take you back there, you'll be calling me in probably 5 minutes to come pick you up.
Yes.
I can't knowingly take you there knowing you're going to be in danger. I wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, and the next scene hits another deep conversation when they have an intervention with Ryle. Alyssa, Marshall, Lily, and Ryle all sit down, which I also thought it was kind of weird that his mom was there and she wasn't really involved in the situation, but
yeah, it sounds like she might be part of the problem, but anyways.
Yeah.
I will say too, I was actually upset that it took this long for an intervention.
Yes.
The entire time I was reading this book before we got to this part, I was like, why is he not in anger management? Why is he not doing treatment? Why is he not in counseling? All of these things to be getting better. Why is he not doing any of it?
Well, and I literally wrote in all capital letters, love Alyssa and Marshall. I just loved that they were backing Lily. And it was a 3-against-1 situation, but I really appreciated that from them because I think Lily needed that little bit of extra strength, knowing she had those people on her side. And
I think Ryle needed it too. I think him seeing it, because I think with Lily, he's so jaded about it that he cannot see reality for what it is. And I think it coming from Marshall and Alyssa, and in the moment, I'm sure it felt awful. I have no doubt about that. Regardless of who you are, it hurts to have to hear that something's wrong with you and you need to fix it. But I think that's probably what actually got through to him is the fact that they said something, which is good. You need those sort of people in your life that'll have your back for those moments. Whether you are the bad guy or the good guy, you need people who are going to call you out on it. So
100%. I really liked the quote where I believe it was Lily that said, not all victims have people like them. That is the case. And I expressed it in the last episode as well, that I feel like Alyssa and Marshall were almost too much to give the story some reality, because that's oftentimes not what people have, is someone like them. So I do think that was a fault in the story, but I love that two people on technically Ryle's side were actually on Lily's and protecting Lily and Emmy essentially as well. And at the same time,
I love that it went. I was going to say, I love that it's also not even Lily and just Emmy. It's also her own daughter. Alyssa even says, you will not be around my daughter unsupervised because your behavior has gotten so bad and unchecked that I cannot trust you around your own niece. And he gets even more defensive about that than he did about his own daughter. And they're like, that's too bad. You can be defensive all you want, but you're going to get it done, or you're no longer going to watch my kid even. So I really feel like I agree with you that I don't think that's realistic, first of all. But I love that she did have those people and to back her up. And I think it really was good for him to get that reality check.
Well, and at the same time that they're having their conversation, Atlas and his mom are actually having a dinner, which I did think, again, it was sweet of Atlas to make his mom's favorite dish, even though she's been the crappiest person on the planet to him and to Josh. But, you know, why would he be a horrible person? So he asked her to sign her rights away and then asked for weekly dinners, which I knew as soon as he asked, she was not going to show up for them. I don't think she cared that much. And even though she acted like she did, I think she only acted like she did because she was afraid she was going to get arrested because the cops may show up at their door for him not attending school. But it just bothered me a little bit there. But we get to the next chapter where finally they say I love you to each other and solidify more of a intense relationship. And he asks Lily to finally move in. And I love that he says, come home. He doesn't say move in with me. He says, come home. And there was also a scene where her mom was on the back porch while she was staying with Atlas. And she even says, wow.
I think it's move-in day. I think that's the day she moved in, I think.
Was it? They were sitting on the back porch.
Yeah, I think that's the day she moved in, and like she's outside chilling. It's the evening, and he had gone to work or something, and then mom comes to drop Emmy off because I think mom was watching Emmy while they were moving, and yeah,
and she says something along the lines of, "It looks like this backyard was made for you and your gardens," and 110%, I totally believe Atlas picked out that house for her, especially whenever she came back in his life, and he was just like, "I've got to move just in case she comes home to me," like. He's just
What
amazing.
a man. What a man. Also, I will say that scene was really sad when Mom was like, "You didn't think I'd recognize him?" And
Yes.
she's like, "Well, no, you only saw him like one time, and that's when Dad beat him to a pulp." And she's like, "Oh no, I saw him another time. I saw him at the
Yes.
hospital." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "I'll never forget that moment." And I think it broke Lily's mom's heart. When he hugged her, I think she was taken aback and was like, "This kid that doesn't even know me knows what's happening in my house and could, again, just good up Atlas and the way he loves people. Ugh, it's just so good."
So the one good note I will ever say about Ryle is that the scene in the parking garage where he allows Marshall to hand Emmy over to Atlas was a huge step in a good direction. I think it was, even though Ryle didn't directly hand it to Atlas, but I do think that was a huge step in his part to sort of clarity. And I mean, even Lily mentioned it because she was crying in the corner of the parking garage. I can't believe he did that. When, even though Ryle didn't directly hand it to Atlas, it was allowing Marshall to hand Emmy over to Atlas was a huge step. So then we get to the wedding day, and his vows was just so sweet. It just brought the whole storyline together for me. It solidified a lot of things. I do wish we got to see the actual wedding and hear what all was actually exchanged on her part. But I just love that Josh was there, Emmy was there. It was just such a sweet moment, and they didn't rush things. They just took their time with it, and just Atlas, he was just amazing.
He is. We talked about this too, but I wish we would have gotten her vows in the end as well.
Yes.
I love the cute little scene that just before his vows where he's looking for Josh and Theo is like, he's going to make you a granddad soon. I thought that was so funny and just a good little comedic relief in there before we hit a hard, heavy scene with the vows. It was so cute.
So do you have anything else you want to go over before we rate the book?
No, I just love Atlas Corrigan. My rating is probably not going to be that great because I have a lot of thoughts on how the book should have been written. But gosh, do I just love Atlas Corrigan.
What's your rating?
I kind of want you to go first.
Okay. So if Atlas was not so fantastic, I probably would have given this book a 3. But because Atlas was like the ideal boyfriend that anybody and everybody would ever want, I would actually give it a 4 just because of him. But solely if he was not so great, it would be a 3. I really don't think there was any other context other than just to add to their story to get to where they got married. I don't think it educated anybody on anything. I don't feel like it really gave any substance to anything that we already didn't think about happening. It just, I think there were several scenes that it probably could have made it better. And even like the interactions with Ryle and stuff like that, I don't feel like they were as intense as what they were in the first book or added much to the storyline. I did appreciate the instances that she had with her mom. I feel like that added some closure to the initial story. And even Atlas getting to be with Emmy's and stuff. I didn't really like the sub storyline with Josh. I get why it was there. And I do think it made us love Atlas a little bit more, but I do think it was not necessary to adding closure to their story. But of course, it added a little bit of dramatic effect to the whole book. But I mean, Atlas was just great. That was honestly the highlight of the entire book for me was Atlas. I didn't really like Lily any more than I did the last book. I didn't hate Ryle any less than I did the last book. Atlas was the only one that added any amplification for me.
So, ironically enough, I 100% agree with you.
Really?
I would also have given it a 3 if not for Atlas, and I would probably give it a 4 simply because I do love Atlas so much.
Yeah.
I totally agree. We talked about earlier in the episode, I think it was a big opportunity to continue educating about domestic violence, and the first one was so hyped around that I think that's why I expected it in book 2 as well.
Yeah.
And then it just didn't. And it really felt like, and I can appreciate this and I can understand it, but it really felt like almost like it was an opportunity to make more money off of the story. And that's why it was written. And I actually was more disappointed when I first read it. The second time that I've read it now, I'm less disappointed with it just being a love story. But I think maybe if I had had different expectations going in, maybe I wouldn't have been as disappointed. But yeah. I did have a different idea of where the story was going to go. But again, that's not my book. I didn't write it. So I still really love Atlas Corrigan. He is one of my favorite male characters in any book that I've read. We said earlier, like, he is the standard. So if you want to know how to be loved, again, read this book, because Atlas is the goal. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that, I don't know. He's just so great. But I guess that's it. So if you liked this episode or any of our other episodes, please subscribe and get access to bloopers, extra content, and more on Apple Pod, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube.
You can also send us book suggestions, comments, or general inquiries to our email at likewereadem@karlempodcast.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We can't wait to hear your thoughts, and you guys can always leave us comments below.
So we appreciate you guys tuning in, listening to this whole episode. If you're still here, next week we will be discussing The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. I absolutely love her and her husband on TikTok, so we're super excited to discuss her book. And we'll definitely be tagging her into some clips.
It was definitely very murder mystery-ish.
With a little bit of spice, just a heads up.
There was initial spice that was totally unexpected. So a little bit of spice was right there.
Yeah, we didn't know anything about that until we started reading. And as soon as I read the prologue, I texted Emily and I was like, what are we about to read?
Yes. So, but it does not have as much smut as what the prologue
you would think it would from reading it. Yeah. There's only like 2 or 3 scenes max.
It gives you a lot of ups and downs, left and rights. It has an expected ending with an unexpected twist. So it definitely gives you that thrill.
But you'll have to tune in next week to hear more about it. And as always, we promise to Karl and like we read them.